Hi, Aaliyah. All right. So, still crazy. I cannot believe it is March 1st. But hi, Ricky. So we are going to do for today. I am going to go through some stuff. So if you like to follow along, I'm going to go kind of quickly on a recap of some of the notes specifically over the homologous chromosomes, which was one of your vocab terms. It will be incredibly helpful for this week. The diagram or the kind of the notes that I'm going to walk through with you today, they're already made, so it's not like I'm going to be writing them out and you can follow along. So I am going to post them though to Google Classroom, so you guys will have a copy of what I write. So you guys can have that for yourself and you can use it or not or whatever. So you guys can follow along there. So, but we're going to look at how genetic information is organized. And then your mid-unit quiz, what I did is I broke it apart. So you guys are going to take part 1 today. So it's 5 questions. And it's only over the sexual and asexual reproduction stuff, which you guys were kind of nailing last time or last week. So it's only over that stuff. None of the stuff that was in your notes on Thursday and Friday. Tomorrow, then we're going to recap all of the how we get the genetic variation stuff. So what was in the notes on Thursday, Friday. We'll model out those processes, and then you guys will have an opportunity to take part 2 of your quiz after we've gone through a whole recap of everything. Okay. But go ahead and okay. So just as a recap, remember, sexual reproduction it combines the genetic information. So when I say genetic information, remember we're really meaning DNA. So sexual reproduction combines the DNA of 2 different organisms to create a genetically unique offspring. Okay, so in order to really understand that, it is going to be important to remember how our DNA is organized in our body. Okay, now to do that, what I did is we got to remember what we've already covered in our last unit and how does that fit to what we're looking at right now. Okay, so I'll kind of zoom in so you guys can see. And remember, if there's at any point you guys are like, what? Okay. Do use the, hi Carter, do use the hand, raise your hand function or drop a question in the chat, okay? And I will be sure to, I've got it up so I can see it, okay? So first things first, remember from last unit, we discussed how, okay, your DNA is the source of your genetic information. It's what holds the code to you. And your code is trapped and kind of contained within these 2 strands of nucleic acids. Okay, so your code is made up of these nitrogen bases, the A's, T's, C's, and G's. Okay, and it's those A's, T's, C's, and G's in the order that they're put in that makes you. Okay, and the 2 strands are going to kind of swirl around each other in what we call a double helix. Okay, so it creates this double helix shape. Now, if I were to unwind it though, and to really kind of stretch it out to see how a single strand is organized, okay, it paints a little bit of a different picture that connects us what we're going to talk about today. So I've taken my DNA, I've unwound it, and I'm going to stretch out my single side. Okay, so I have my repeating or my nitrogen bases, so my genetic code. And remember, DNA is really organized or broken into segments that we call genes. Okay, and that's kind of what we learned about last unit. We kind of stopped at this, we know that they're genes. Now connecting it to our current unit, you guys did that activity where you guys looked at your traits and we kind of identified certain traits and we started to call them single gene traits. So really what a gene is doing is your genes are the instructions for our traits. So for instance, if I were to break this segment of DNA down, okay, or I broke my whole DNA strand into different segments, okay, and I kind of color coded them here. This one, for example, could be, this is the instruction for your hair color. This one would be the instruction for your eye color. This one could be in the instruction for your hairline, what type of hairline you have. And this one could be the instruction for, could you run, like roll your tongue or not, like, you know? Okay. Now, each strand is organized and broken into those segments, okay, or those genes. All right. How are you guys feeling about that? So like signs of life here in the chat, like, yep, got it, or no, heck no, don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Good. Now, the cool thing is that you don't have one single strand of DNA, okay? You have 46 strands of DNA that are tucked inside of the nucleus of each of your cells. Now, the way that your body organizes that, all of that information, okay, and each strand is organized in this fashion. Each strand of DNA is broken down into particular genes of varying lengths, and each gene is responsible for a different trait that makes you. So something about how you look, or something about how you physically operate, everything about you. Now, when we're like the way that your DNA is organized is very similar to like an encyclopedia. And I was thinking about it like earlier, like, man, do they know what an encyclopedia is? Because that's such an old school thing. But basically, if you're unfamiliar, an encyclopedia is a set of books, okay, that are alphabetized A through Z. And each book, so if you were looking at the book of A, it would have a vast, huge variety of information about all things that start with the letter A. So it could have like aardvarks and avalanches and avocados, like all this huge amount of information about all these things that start with A. And then the next book would be all the things that start with the letter B, all this information. And then C, and so on and so forth for each letter of the alphabet. Okay, so it was complete knowledge, like all of our knowledge was organized into these books. Okay, DNA is really similar to this, except our DNA is organized into these sets. Okay, and we don't have one for each letter. Our information is organized into two. So each volume, okay, of our DNA comes in a set that you inherit from your parents. You get one copy of the set from your dad and one from your mom. And then volume 2, you get one set from your dad and one set from your mom. Volume 3, one from dad, one from mom, all the way down. You have a total of 23 volumes or 23 sets of instructions that make up you, for a grand total of 46 chromosomes, if I were to count each one of those individually. So 46 would be 23 times 2, okay? So the big difference here is that your information is organized into these pairs. Now, remember, just like an encyclopedia, where I would have different information discussed in each one of these books, the same goes for your chromosomes or for your DNA sets. So volume 1 or chromosome set number 1 is going to have a very particular set of information about you. These guys, volume 2, completely different set of information. Same thing for 3 and 4 and 5. Each set is going to have something different. Okay. Now, in order to be organized like this, your DNA can't just be floating around here in loosey-goosey strands, okay? What they do is they are going to coil up and become tightly packed little units called chromosomes. Now, there are a couple different reasons why they form chromosomes, but the two major ones are, one, it saves a lot of space because, think about it, there's 46 of these huge strands floating around in your nucleus, and that's a little like tight. So what they'll do is they form these chromosomes, and so it saves space. Okay, and the second reason is that, remember, this code is really, really precious and we don't want to damage it. Okay, because if we damage it, then that damages our instructions. So it kind of creates this protective layer, and it helps protect our instructions. So when the DNA kind of coils and compacts and spins and squishes down on itself, you get what we call chromosomes. Okay. All right. How are you guys doing so far? Questions on DNA coiling down to form chromosomes, or that you inherit one chromosome from mom and one from dad? How are you guys doing on that? So again, that show of life, like, yep, you're breathing, you got it. Okay. All right. Now here's where we get into this next piece where we're looking at that vocab. Now, remember I said these come in pairs. So one from dad, one from mom, one from dad, one from mom. And each one of these, quote, volumes or chromosome sets or pairs has a unique set of information. Now, the chromosomes that make up those sets, so let's say this is chromosome set number 1. Each chromosome that makes up that set, so the one I got from dad and one I got from mom, each one would be referred to as a single chromosome, okay? But when they are partnered together, okay, if I kind of take it up here, notice how I color coded them. So you have the green, then the blue, then the pink, and then the purple. So I had the gene for hair color, then the gene for eye color, then the gene for your hairline, and then the gene for tongue rolling. Now that would be the information that's found in volume 1 for you. Now, when you have these pairs, the cool thing about them is that the chromosome you inherited from your dad and the one from your mom, the instructions for that particular trait would be located at the exact same spot on that chromosome. So chromosome 1 from mom and the chromosome 1 from dad would have the same information for the trait at the same spot for each one of those genes. So they would have a trait, okay? What was it? Hair color would be at the same spot. Eye color, the instructions for eye color would be at the same spot. The instructions for, what was that next one? Hairline would be at the same spot. The instructions for tongue rolling would be at the same spot. Notice how I kept saying the word same. When you have genes that are located at the same spot and the same type of gene located at the same spot, the word same or the prefix same in science is homo. So we call these homologous chromosomes. They're essentially partnered. They're like the same. So homologous chromosomes, homologous chromosomes are the set that you inherit from mom and dad for each of those pairs, the 23 pairs. Okay. Now, the big difference here is that this does not mean that the type of information, this is the type of information provided. Now, what do you actually inherit? The version of this trait could be different. So let's say the information in here for hair color, dad could say blonde hair, but mom's could be the sequence could say brown hair. So the version or exact instructions for the hair color could be different on these. However, the actual gene, like the trait, is still hair color. Same thing. Eye color, dads could say, well, this sequence is going to be blue, but mom's could be slightly different. The A's, the T's, the C's, and the G's. That sequence could actually mean brown eyes. They're still both eye color, which makes them the same type of gene. However, what is actually the code in here could be slightly different. And that's what gives us our different genes and different combinations. Same thing for hairline. Dads could say widow's peak, moms could say straight hairline, or they could both say the same thing, or they could be, okay? So what the actual sequences in here can be the same or different, but the type or category of trait is going to be the exact same. And then when this is represented the same way on your next set of chromosomes, except you're going to have different traits. So it's the different types of traits. This could be how tall you are. This could be, can you process dairy products? This could be, are you going to be musically inclined? This could be, do you create insulin? Okay. So each one of these sets of DNA that appear in your body are going to have different instructions for making you. Okay, and they come in homologous sets or homologous pairs, and we call them homologous chromosomes. But each one is an individual chromosome. Okay, now when we get into what we're talking about this week, the reason I want to kind of hammer this home that these come in sets and that it's the combination, and these different traits are come in pairs, one from mom, one from dad, is because this week is going to be talking about, okay, well, what's the probability of certain combinations of different traits showing up together, okay, being inherited from mom and dad? Tomorrow, the whole goal of meiosis and being able to go through sexual reproduction is the ability to break up homologous pairs, okay, and that's what we're going to look at tomorrow. So how does the body go ahead and separate these pairs? How do we break up our little DNA encyclopedia so that you can inherit half the information? What does that look like? Okay. Questions on that piece? Okay. All right. Again, I'm going to post this on Google Classroom. So like if you want that, if you're like, okay, that makes sense, or if you want to go through it a little bit slower on your own, I'll post the video and the diagram so you guys can have that. But for your task today, you guys are going to be taking part 1 of your genetic variation quiz, which just is going over the sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction stuff. It is 5 questions, all multiple choice. So it should take you about 5 to 10 minutes to do that part. And then tomorrow you'll do part 2. So in Google Classroom, you will see both, but you'll see 2 scores. So for part 1 and then a different one for part 2. But when I put it into Skyward, you'll just see them combined. So you'll see 1 score. But if you guys don't have any questions, you can jump on over and start that. Or you can wait till this afternoon when you got that independent time to take that. And then the only other thing would be is just making sure that you have the rest of your Nearpod and everything taken care of. Make sure to submit that certificate of completion, and that slide 13 is done and done. You do have about 5 minutes left, so if you have any questions, because I didn't get a chance to see you on Friday, you can stick around and get those answered. Otherwise, remember, 3rd period starts at 10:40. And then I will see you guys tomorrow afternoon. Bye.